Breaking Barriers.
Want to welcome you to another episode of Breaking Barriers podcast. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We are going to talk about what's the history behind the name Breaking Barriers, because it's not only a pulling tractor at this point, it is also a podcast. I have a lot of people ask me, where did the name come from and why do you have it? So we're going to start at the very beginning. I'm going to talk about my story and what brought me to the position I'm in today and how we arrived at the name Breaking Barriers. So it really has nothing to do with tractor pulling, but it is there hopefully to inspire a lot of people, and hopefully you can relate. I don't believe my story is that unusual, and I don't believe my story is that special. But if it inspires you and helps you, that's what it's all about. And that's really what's behind the name Breaking Barriers. So my tractor pulling career really began, or my experience in tractor pulling began at 5 years old in 1975 in Wellman, Iowa. My oldest brother worked for an international dealership, and on July the 4th, there was a tractor pull being held as part of the festivities of July the 4th. A little background on all of this. I grew up in a very sheltered culture, and up to that point, we had never celebrated July the 4th. I didn't know what that even was or what that meant, and I had no idea. When my father said, "Do you want to go to a tractor pull?" what a tractor pull was, I didn't understand any significance around July the 4th. But my brother was pulling a 1206 that day that belonged to the dealership, and so he wanted to go watch, and he took my brother and we went over there. Now, the early experience that I had in those days, it was a wooden, we called them hay drags, other people call them skids. I know they use metal ones as well, but then people were spaced along the side of the track. I recall chains being bolted to the side of the tractor or fastened to the side of the tractor so that if your front end came up and the chain left the ground, you were disqualified. And those were the basic rules. They would sometimes put a tractor, obviously, or something on that skid in order to have weight to start with. And then we even stood along the track, and I remember getting on it with my father and my brother, and we would weight down that skid until the tractor would spin out. I thought it was an incredible experience. At 5 years old, I didn't process it that well, but it was a lot of fun. And that was my first and only tractor pull for the year. A year later, in 1976, of course, was a great year for our country, and we went back again. And it was a little bit bigger deal that year. There was a lot of people more festive, and were participating, and this was just an amazing sight for me to see, because as a young person, I was just starting to learn about the history of our country. And we left that tractor pull. I was so excited, and I went and told my friends about it, which was a fatal mistake for the next number of years. After that point, I was not allowed to attend tractor pulls. It was the church we were involved in didn't want us to go. And so really until I was a teenager and could sneak out of the house, we really couldn't go to any more tractor pulls. Interestingly enough, I grew up in the Kelowna, Iowa community. And for those of you across the country are familiar, I'm sure, with NTPA, the largest sanctioning body of tractor pulling. And Ernie Ropp was a local John Deere dealer and a hero in our town. And he had I believe, a 4430. He started with a D21, but was very instrumental with local pulling and then got involved in the NTPA. I know they went on to win some championships, or at least one in the NTPA, and a lot of local stuff. But really were local heroes for our community. And at that point, they were bringing in, Kelowna was putting on a ITPA event, which was a lower division level that was affiliated with the NTPA as I understand it. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. And we would get big names in here like Arlen Jensen, we would get John Klug, Lee Elward. We had the Carroll family come up and pull with us. I'm leaving so many names out. I believe Scott and Dick Buss were there numerous times. I recall seeing them pull at that pull. I believe Arlen Jensen. I know there's many I'm leaving out. That's on the tractor side. When it came to trucks, We had Wayne Longnecker, Jerry Fornash, Bob Chickering, Emil Murda. I believe Kenny Sanders was there with a tractor, and then later on with modifieds and trucks as well. So it turned into quite an event of who's who. And these folks were bigger than life to a teenage boy that was just had a burning desire to get to a tractor pull. Kelowna also would put on a farm pull at those times. And that was when I got my first experience. And at that point, we had a 766 on the farm. We had to put a narrow front on it. And I did a lot of work to go down and pull and managed to get 2 second places with that tractor. Just always powered out. Couldn't bring myself to get in a low enough gear. So those were kind of my early tractor pulling experiences. But I'm going to go step back just one step, even before I pulled tractors. So when I was 15 years old, I lost my father. And this is not a story I tell a whole lot, but it was a monumental period of my life, and it was life-changing from the fact that in 1985, when we lost him, we were in the middle of a farm crisis. Our family was probably no different than many others. We were working hard. All of us would, all hands on deck. We did dairy. We had pigs, raised pork, and then did row crops. My father also did some custom farming, round baling and things like that. He had been ill for some period of time and just had like a weak heart and lungs. So every year he would struggle with pneumonia and things. And we knew that he had a pacemaker, but still at 49 years old, you don't expect to lose your dad. And when that happened, my culture was of such where I was kind of at 15 years old, just left to my own. And there was a deep amount of pain, obviously, from losing him, just for the fact that I really didn't have any friends and boys my age in our church group, and we really didn't associate outside of that. So I felt very alone and isolated, but my dad was, for all intensive purposes, he was my best friend. He was the person I could talk to. We worked on tractors together. The last project we did was put live hydraulics on a Super M, and we still have that tractor in the family today. So those were a lot of things I started to learn from him, the mechanical ability and the things that he did. After his passing I stepped up and started doing a lot of the custom work. Other family members took over maybe the dairy side and others the hogs, and we all would pitch in and help each other. But when it comes to the breaking barriers side of it, I guess the story started when we lost him for me. And the overwhelming experience of that isolation and losing him and the financial strain on the family was very great. And all of us bared a large part of that responsibility. But there really was nobody there to direct us. My brother and I, just older than me, were really left to the farm. Other family members came in soon after and helped, but the tensions and pressures were rising. And there came a point later that summer where I kind of hit a breaking spot. And as I hit that point one day, when the family was busy, needed me, I broke down, jumped in the truck, and I drove out the driveway with no intention of returning. As I drove down the road, I went to a place I never went before. And I walk into a woods that I never went into before. And as I decided to sit under this big oak tree to contemplate my fate in life and how miserable I was and why I was going to do what I was going to do. And as I sat there, the words of my father rang out and just said, someday you're going to have a beautiful family and you're going to be doing wonderful things. And when he told me that was 2 weeks to the day before he passed away. I should take that back. It was 10 days, but to the day before he passed away, he called me into his bedroom, sat me down, and just gave me his farewell speech, told me he loved me. And as I sat under that tree that day, I kept running that whole experience through my head, knowing that he would be disappointed if I gave up on life because of the things he told me. So after being there a few hours, I got back in the truck, went home, and life went on as we know it. But I made a commitment that day that I would learn something new every day and become more educated, wiser, and be a contributing person into society and be a positive factor in life. I had only an 8th grade, or not even an 8th grade education at that point. I dropped out of school. I was needed on the farm. And as I took that journey and decided to become a better person, it's been a long road since then. But I started to develop other friendships with people and get involved in other things that would also feed my my appetite for performance and motorsports. So I got into doing some derby cars, raced some motocross. Wasn't hugely successful at any of those. Just really didn't have a lot of guidance with it. The interesting part, though, with the motocross, the one thing I worked on really hard was hole shots, because that was a place I could get a quick advantage on somebody. And that comes back to play in my success in tractor pulling to this day. But really, that was a big turning point where I drew a line in the sand and decided that I would never go back to that spot again. I wouldn't go back to that spot mentally, emotionally, or physically, and I never have. I've driven within a mile of that place, but that's as close as I've ever gotten, and then only if I needed to, because I put that all behind me and moved forward. And what a wonderful life that it has been. Fast forward through the years, of course, I end up getting married, having 4 kids, and I start to realize the things my father had talked to me about that I would experience. Eventually went through a bitter divorce, which was a struggle of its own. But coming through that, I ended up with my youngest son living with me. And as he was in high school, he started to face a lot of the same struggles that I did, but maybe in a different way. And he had lost one of his classmates to suicide, and then he was with his best friend less than a year later when we lost him in a drowning accident. And as a 15 and 16-year-old boy, he just couldn't cope with that in a healthy manner. And there was just a spiral of events that took him down a really dark path. Through a series of just different things we did, he kind of started to piece some things back together. And at some point, I realized that the kids are out of the house. I'm at home alone now. This might be something that we could do together that would build just a bond between us, that we could work on this tractor together like I had worked on tractors with my father. So we started the process of building a pulling tractor. And it was quite a task. What I learned real quickly was folks in the tractor pulling world are very helpful and will give you a lot of advice. And there was a lot of people that helped point me in different directions, because I really didn't know anything about high performance tractor pulling. Beyond farm pulling, that was as far as I'd ever gotten. So we started working on gathering parts, building alliances, trying to figure out how we're going to do this. And eventually bought a chassis out of New York and brought it back and got the tractor built. But before that tractor was completed, my son was experiencing yet another very difficult thing in life. And I was at a tractor pull on the 4th of July when I got the call that we're looking for him. We had multiple police departments, state police looking for him, and we fortunately enough found him. And from that road forward, he's went through a lot of recovery, and he is doing well. And his story is his to tell. But that was a bond going through that experience that really built the foundation of where we ended up with breaking barriers. It's not unusual for us as humans to feel a lot of pain and have a lot of struggle, because that's just life. That's what it is. It can be financial, it can be friends, it can be very personal and painful and humiliating. But we all deal with that. As we built this tractor, knowing the season's coming up, we have to find a name to put on it, we felt. and wanted something that had some significance and meaning. So I grabbed a notepad, and Jarrett and I would just sit down and start to write out names. And we'd put 10, 15 on the list. A week later, we'd sit down, scratch half of them off, and add a few more to it. And that kept happening. And after about 2 months of this, we were down to about 5 or 6 names. And one of the last names we put on the list, I just said, "What about breaking barriers?" And he just told me, he said, "Dad, I don't like that name." I said, "Okay, that's fine." But I said, "I'm going to leave it on the list." And as we narrowed that down, he called me about 3 days later. And he says, "Dad, I've been thinking about it. That's the name of the tractor." At that point, I was okay with not naming it that because I felt like he was so adamant he didn't want that. But he just went on to tell me, he said, "I understand now why you suggested that name and why we should name the tractor that." So I'm sure a lot of folks can play on the word breaking barriers like we're breaking through barriers from going a distance on the track, through success, things like that. But it has nothing to do with tractor pulling. It has everything to do with life. So I hope this encourages you guys and gives you some insight on what that may look like for you. One thing I've learned about tractor pulling is it's one of the most generous, tight-knit communities I have ever been a part of. I've been a part of auto racing, motorcycle racing, derby cars, you name it. I've been in associations, been a part of a lot of different groups. But if I go somewhere and I have a problem, I have had people that have never seen me before, maybe only met me a few hours before or not met me at all, walk up and offer parts and help. It's the most amazing group and family that you could ever be a part of. So if you're considering watching this and considering becoming a part of a tractor pulling family, I would absolutely encourage it. We don't always get along. Not everybody always likes each other. Not everybody always likes the rules and how things shake out and how they go down. But at the end of the day, this is a group that's very family oriented. We have families that come in and pull together, and then we have the tractor pulling families that come together and really just become as one big family. So that's really the history behind the name Breaking Barriers. It really has nothing to do with tractor pulling. It has more to do with some of the hurdles and the things we've overcame in life. Now, certainly we approach tractor pulling the same way that we do everything else in life. My son and I work hard at honing our craft and being good at the skill and the trades we're involved in. But we want to carry that over as well into tractor pulling. As that season started to progress on our first year, just because of my day job, I already was shooting some podcasts. I felt like it was important to sit down with a few people I knew that I admired. First off was Ernie Ropp, but we lost him. So I got a hold of Warren, his son, and we shot a podcast with him, which you can watch on here. And then also Kenny Sanders was a childhood hero of ours. I just couldn't imagine putting 4 turbos on a tractor the size of his. And it was just larger than life that he did that. And about 5 years prior to us starting to pull tractors, I'd crossed paths and really got to know him on a personal level. And he had given me a side panel that hangs in the Breaking Barrier shop today. And it just really started kind of the process of us wanting to maybe preserve this history. Because what I learned was my kids didn't know their grandfather. Sometimes we sit down and we tell stories, but they really don't know much about him. And I realized that within about 3 generations, they're gone. There's really no recollection. The stories die and they're just gone because there's no physical contact past 3 generations in most cases. Sometimes you'll see 4 and 5, but it's a baby and there's not really interaction at high levels. So that's the motivation behind starting the Breaking Barriers podcast. And there was no intent or really no plan to do this on any scale other than just do a few episodes, put them out there and see what happens. When I sat down with Warren Ropp, we had an absolute incredible interview, and he was so gracious to be the first one and take a chance on us and let us do that interview. But if nothing happened, but it recorded history for the grandkids in that family so they could understand what their grandpa that they probably never met did and what he meant to the community, it was worth it to me. Because that's such a great family that gave so much back and was so foundational in the Kelowna community. Kenny Sanders, again, I just probably did that more on a selfish note because I really wanted to hear some of those stories and learn more about him and the history of what he had done. Another one I sat down with early on, I believe was maybe the third one, was Mike Fornash. Jerry Fornash had the modified called the Lurch, and we did an episode with Mike, and Mike didn't want to do it. And I just said, Mike, do your grandkids know what their great-grandfather did? And the phone went silent. And he said, okay, I'm in. And that's the purpose for the podcast. So because of the name and the play off the tractors and the whole story that I'm tying together with what the name even came from, me being a huge history buff, I love to know where did things come from? What can we learn from the past? How do we preserve that so future generations can learn from it? Because all of us pass through this life pretty quickly, and it's all about supporting and helping others. So that's really the beginning of even then where the Breaking Barriers podcast came from. Unknown to me, there was far more interest, and I learned, I guess I was naive in not knowing, but there's really nobody out there that's going back and digging through and getting all the history of tractor pulling in that sport. So that is now the purpose of the Breaking Barriers podcast. It's gets an episode dropped every 2 weeks. And I think in the next 12 months, you're going to see a lot of changes coming. You're probably going to see a lot more podcasts coming. You're going to see more groups that we have that you can get involved in. But the primary thing to look for right now is on Facebook. We've got a Breaking Barriers Facebook page. We also have a Breaking Barriers Facebook group. So there's some things that are out there, and you can also contribute to that group and share some of your own stories. We really enjoy when people get on there and share some of the things that they've experienced like this. And then, of course, YouTube. And that's where we're hosting all of the podcasts at this point. iTunes and Spotify will maybe be up by the time this is released. So you'll be able to get it on those platforms as well. But the entire basis of Breaking Barriers is simply overcoming the obstacles we face in life and then preserving the history so the next generations can learn from that and build upon the history of their family and take that strength and character to move them forward in a positive direction. I just want to take this time to thank all of you as an audience. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support that we have received. The calls, the messages, we literally get them every day. It's unimaginable to me that this is such a positive and popular thing. And I feel so grateful, and I am so gracious that I with you to follow us, support us, and do the things that you do so that we can continue to do this. I plan to continue bringing more content and listening to more of your stories. And if you would reach out, send me people with phone numbers and emails that we can contact and record their story for you, we want to do nothing more than that. There's one more episode I want to point out to you. There's a gentleman from Northwest Iowa by the name of Fred Nichols. I had a friend of mine reach out to me and just suggest to me that I interview Fred. So he connected me with some granddaughters, and we started that process. Fred's dealing with a brain tumor, and he was on chemo. And we caught a window of time where he was feeling really good. He was off the chemo, and we did an absolute wonderful interview with Fred. And we did it via Zoom because he was unable to travel, and we were unable to get in a physical location together. And at the end of that interview, his grandkids were saying they heard stories they've never heard before. And then they came back and, said we really hit the right window. He may have not been in good enough health to even do it later. And when that episode came out, I never understood the attraction to black hoods on John Deere's, but that's the man who started that. And there's a good friend of mine locally that we pull with that has a black hood on his John Deere, and it's all because his first hero was Fred Nichols. And I share that story just to inspire you for several reasons. I don't want to try to be motivational. We're just recording history here. But at the same time, the things we do in life impact future generations, and they make a difference in the life of other people. And the inspiration that my buddy has pulled tractors for 30 years, and his goal was to have a black hood, and he's had a tremendous amount of success in the recent years. It's so inspiring to see what that's done. But what's even bigger to me is to watch him do it with his son. And I see his son-in-law involved. And they end up, winning the points championship. And to see his son honor his father, and I don't know if he even understands why that hood's black today. But those are the stories that are important to record. I love history. If you're listening to this, you clearly love history. I am happy to take your calls, take your messages, follow us out on those social media platforms. Send us the folks that we need to contact and that we can get them on an episode so that we can share their story, preserve that piece of history so that it'll live on in the lives of others and we will not be forgotten in this game of life. I appreciate every one of you. I want to thank you for watching Breaking Barriers podcast, and I appreciate the support and the follows and the likes. Continue to follow the greatest sport in the world, which I believe is tractor pulling. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Breaking Barriers.